forget who was the secretary, Virginia Cox was our secretary. And so we began to go for the incorporation. We went back to the state of Ohio. We were reincorporated pretty quickly. And that's where John Perkacci came into the picture. I mentioned him earlier. John came into the picture and did a pro bono in helping us to get our 501c3 back. And so pretty quickly, within about 5-6 months, we had our 501c3 incorporation and we were off and running. The Clark County teachers, retired teachers, the people who really were pushing that was a man, Mr. James Rutherford, and I think there may be some in here that remember Jim Rutherford. He was an educator in Clark County. Jim had been pushing this issue for a long time. We needed to find an old school that we could recreate what children going to school in the late 1800s, I will take some water,
Yes, sir.
or early 1900s, what it was like to go to a one-room school. Beautiful idea, it really was. I mean, that was, and we were very much in support of that. The only thing is we didn't have a lot of money, but the retired teachers they told us right up front, that's not all we're interested in, is someone becoming a 501c3, because at that time they claimed they could not get their 501c3, the retired teachers group. They later did, but for some reason back there they didn't think they could get a 501, or the federal government wouldn't classify them as a 501c3. So they needed an organization to do that. We reorganized, as I said. We became the 501c3, and at that point then we became the fiscal agent for the Clark County Retired Teachers Association, and that's what they needed. Somebody where the money was coming in had to be responsible for that money. And so we took that responsibility, or thank you. Thank you very much. And so we began the project. And the Clark County teachers, I'm just going to use that as the preference over that, they began to raise funds and to look for people that might help us renovate the building. Randy McGilvery, who was a contractor here in the area, did most of the work in that building. They put a new roof on it. And first of all, I might tell you who owned the building. We had to get the building, first of all. The building was owned by the Baptist church there. And so what we had to do with them, we had gone to talk with them, and what we wanted them to do, if they would, is to give it to us for $1 or whatever, which they did. They were willing to do that under certain restrictions. It had to be used for the purpose that we were stating it was going to be used. And there were some other factors. We had to do some things, had to build a garage for them, because they had used that building as a storage building. So we agreed to that we would raise funds to build them a storage building. And there were 2 or 3 other things. And so the building was deeded over then to our group, to the New Carlisle Historical Society. And so that was the beginning. And the teachers raised quite a bit of money during that period of time. I think our cost for the renovations of that building was somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. Put a new roof on it, a lot of things done on the inside. Randy did a very nice job in terms of bringing it back aesthetically as it would have looked in the 1920s or 1900s up through. It still was being used up till 1920 is what I should say. It was 1920 when the building was actually closed, and the students were moved from then over to the little round building, the building we're trying to keep and restore now. So all the students were moved into that building at that time, elementary students. Well, even high school, because Olive Branch, the high school building, wasn't built till 1929, so all of the students were in the little round building in our district at that time. There were a lot of things in that building, furniture, desk, there was some other things, a number of other little items that were brought, the bell on the building, it's the original bell. was owned by the people we didn't know that until we got into it. People right across the road had kept that bell. They donated all of those things. A lot of those things were donated back to the Teachers Association, Historical Society, and the building. They began to work on the building about 2001, and it was finished by the bicentennial, 2003, and it was dedicated that year in the summer of 2003. We had some problems along the way, like nothing is ever foolproof, but basically that went a lot easier, I can tell you, than the John Paul house. It worked out, and the church was very cooperative with us, at least at that point. We run into a little problems with the church later on, because at a point in time after the work had been done and the program was in operation, students were coming in into the building. I think, have any of you gone out to experience a day in the life of a child in 1901 or 2? I'm sure you have.
Still got that. I don't know where they got them all, but the books are there that used to be in the 1800s out there yet. I got some at home, but they got a whole one.
Some McGuffey books. And
all of them.
Yeah.
I don't know where they got them.
I can't tell you right offhand. I remember at the time who gave them, but I can't tell you that right offhand, Royal. But someone in the district gave them to them. I can't remember the name of that people. But anyway, the church was a little reluctant when we went to them, and we wanted to transfer the deed from the Historical Society to the Teachers Association. Let me back up a moment before I go forward with that notion. An attorney friend of mine, I went to an attorney friend of mine in Springfield, Daniel Harkins, and Teachers Association kept telling me they could not get a 501c3. And I said, I don't understand that. I can't understand why you think you can't. Well, that's what we're told, we can't get it. Mr. Harkins did some research on it, and there was nothing that said they couldn't do it. So he did the promo work for them, and within about 6 months they had their 501c3. After that occurred, in the interim, we were keeping 2 sets of records. Dee was keeping a set of records, my wife was for our local organization, and she would get with the treasurer of the retired teachers and the transfer information. It was kind of a silly process, and so we wanted to do away with that. It seemed to make sense to, for them to take it over. It took us 10 years to get that done, but we finally did. They were reluctant to I think to allow us to transfer the building, that we would not continue to follow the rules that had been set up in the deed. And we finally convinced them that that can't be changed. Whoever owns the building, whoever owns that deed, that's what's in the deed, and they're responsible for fulfilling that, just as we were. Well, we finally got that done after 10 years of study, and so it became a part now. The Clark County Retired Teachers Association, it's their building. They maintain it, and everything else that's involved with, pay the insurance on it, all of that, which they did before too. They were doing that. I mean, the Historical Society, other than donations that we made, financial donations, we really didn't have money tied up in it specifically. We didn't have the money to do that in the first place. So everything that they did, and that was a good cooperation we had between the teachers. It was a great thing that happened, I believe. The building is still being used, still for the same purpose. And now I think we're even allowing some students or some grades from outside of the county, if there's space. I think some classes from Graham and some other areas now have come down, and from other schools, obviously within Clark County. It's just not Tecumseh School District. It's all of Clark County. And it's 4th grade, isn't it? 4th grade or 5th grade? Third grade now, isn't it? They've changed it, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful experience, and if you get a chance sometime, it's kind of fun just to go out and sit in the back of the room and watch it. But they do everything. They're asked to dress the part, although they aren't required, but most everybody does. They bring their lunch. They have the bathrooms, the toilets out and back. That's a big thing with the kids, you know. But anyway, they go through that experience. The whole day is spent. They're brought over in the morning. They stay there the whole day, and their whole experience is built around how a class would have been operated in the 1900s. And the one thing that I think all of you have heard this before, think about back then in those one-room schools that kids went to school from grades 1 through 8. And I challenge anybody in this room to go back and take the old 8th grade test that was given.
I have copies of that.
I do too. Have you passed it? I had trouble passing it, but I'll tell you, those kids had to take that test at the 8th grade, and it was equivalent to what would have been a high school diploma today, or it really was. Some of the questions that you were asked upon that test, some of the math problems that you were given, it was not easy. But you know, stop and think about it. The kids in grades 1, they went from 1 to 8 there in that same building. They all learned, they were learning everybody else's lesson. Because even though they might be working on their lesson while the teacher was teaching the 4th or 5th grade, by osmosis, they were learning because they heard that information. So they learned right through, I think 8 years, they were learning. At the 1st grade, they were hearing things that I'm sure they retained. And I think that's why kids did so well with those tests that they had to take at the 8th grade. Because not many of them went on to high school from there. That was it, the 8th grade education. Those who did probably were capable financially to do that. Parents to be able to send them.
Didn't you have to pay to go to high school?
Yes, in many places you did. That's right. So it was something they just didn't do. And but it is a wonderful experience. And if you ever have the opportunity, Linda Clements is the primary teacher there. Although I think, are there some others?
Nancy Fink, she's volunteers there as well. Mrs. Sherwood volunteers as well.
Okay, Nancy does. I think I heard that. Okay, yeah. But Linda Clements would be the one that she would be very happy. I think if you were interested in going out sometime. They'll start classes in April.
They do it in the warmer months. I know when we go in the fall,
September and October.
we're only allowed those 2 months in the fall because of heating issues and weather.
I think she tries weather.
They try to get our district in the fall, and then anyone else in homeschool in the spring.
Okay.
Is how I think they've scheduled.
Okay.
But I don't think a lot of adults have had the opportunity to go. It'd be nice if it was open, like when we have our Heritage Festival. Well, it's not a Heritage Festival anymore. The Airplane Festival in the fall. It'd be nice if they could be open to let the public come in and see that.
And there's probably no reason that couldn't be arranged.
Yeah, that would be very nice.
It's probably something I've never thought about in terms of being on that committee, but I'm sure Linda would be very. I've taken these. I took the Sertoma Club for one meeting, one of our meetings that's been back several years ago, and Linda actually did a class, in a sort of an abbreviated edition. We didn't stay all day, but we were there like a couple of hours. We had our lunch, took our lunch there, and then she went through a program with us. That would be a nice thing to do if there's a club or a group of people would want to get together. I'm sure Linda would be happy. Nancy Sherwood, I'm sure anybody that's involved in that. They love what they're doing, and they do a great job at that. And it's a wonderful program. Those kids will never forget the experience that they have there when they do that.
Those kids are better behaved at that one day at the one-room schoolhouse than all year in public school.
Well, let me tell you something. If Linda Clements is there, I bet they are.
Yes, and some teachers are good too, because that was their teacher. Because Miss Clemens was their teacher.
Yeah,
So they behave.
Well, I've been to her class, and she does a good job in disciplining her
Well, back
kids.
then,
They were-
the
they-
kid could get wrapped on the knuckles.
Yeah, well, back
Today,
then it was
you
a
can't do
different
that,
thing.
Get sued.
Do they get to do it that day?
They get a paddle
Dance.
demonstration.
Yes.
And Linda will say, don't ever let this get on public social
Yeah.
media, but she'll have the kids bend over and grab their
Ankles.
ankles and she'll pretend to, you know, and
They're
so
not allowed
didn't
to do
Nancy
that
Fink,
anymore.
but no, they're not allowed.
No.
They put them in the dunce,
Yeah.
dunce chair.
Does
Does
Kids
she
like
goes
photo
through
ops
that
for
too,
the
doesn't she?
dunce.
But they put the dunce cap on, you know.
And they go up on the
It's a wonderful
resuscitation
experience to
bench.
There's
see.
nothing wrong with public humiliation.
No,
You're
I-
not allowed to do that anymore.
As we were saying, you know, I
what
think we
America
sometimes
does, I think.
spoil our kids today, but by not letting them experience some of these things that when we grew up, that was just a part of it. I'm not, you know, a believer of beating on kids or anything like that, but a slap on the back and the butt doesn't hurt sometimes.
I told you
know?
when I got here, I got that. I'm still here.
I suspect all